Hey guys, Poro here with another Worlds 2025 team breakdown, this time for AL from the LPL. People who have been following along all year will remember the Pandas from their MSI run where they finished 3rd. People might also remember my large amount of praise for the squad in Split 2, where I talked about how they were my favorite team and I had been following them for years. Well, unfortunately, they are no longer my favorite team due to some out-of-game incidents that happened that I will not go over in this video, but either way, we'll get right into going over the team. AL are an org who have historically not been very good. Their LPL tenure is plagued with missing playoffs and having multiple bottom-of-the-barrel placements, including back-to-back 16ths in 2023 spring and summer. However, with the addition of Coach Tabe and a revamped roster, AL made their first playoffs appearance in 2024 where they finished 5th, and just 2 more roster changes led to AL being arguably the favorites to win 2025. They had an impressive 2nd place finish in Split 1, followed by a 1st place finish in Split 2, and their MSI run had many people believing this would be the team who would run the domestic Split 3. It started out a bit rough though, as AL would drop their first 2 series against BLG and Weibo. At the time, I figured it would be fine. BLG is a pretty solid team to lose to, and most of the teams have a history of underperforming in the first few weeks after getting back from MSI. However, AL's run of inconsistency would not stop as they dropped both of their series against Top Esports, a series to IG, and even a series to a slumping WE. They would finish the regular season at just 8-6, placing them 4th for playoffs. It wasn't looking good there either, as they lost a best of 5 to Weibo Gaming to get dropped into the lower bracket, but from there they would ramp up as they made their way to the lower bracket finals, picking up dominant 3-0s against both IG and JDG. While AL would end up losing to Top Esports in this lower bracket finals, they had enough championship points from their strong placements in Split 1 and 2 to automatically qualify to Worlds as the LPL 2 seed, and the run they had in playoffs might mean they're back in form. Before we go over the team's strengths and weaknesses as a unit, let's take a look at the players. Flandre is the top laner, and he might have a good case for being the most underrated player of all time. I feel like I see people constantly try to talk down on Flandre or say he's trash, but I think Flandre is good enough to even have a case for being on a top 10 top laners of all time list. That's a conversation for another day though. If I had to describe Flandre's playstyle, I would say he's someone who does the dirty work for his team. Back in his mechanical prime, he was somebody who would lock in crazy 1v9 champions and try to take over, but he's since changed his game into a more well-rounded skill set. Something I think Flandre does really well is build space in teamfights. He can sometimes go overboard and end up taking too much damage or dying too fast, but I think for the most part, Flandre has a really good understanding of controlling areas and stalling for time. In fact, I think this may be where some people end up coming to the conclusion that he's not actually an elite talent. He's rarely ever popping off in games or carrying, and people will just see him die a lot or do low damage in fights. However, if you look closely at AL's objective setups, you'll notice just how much easier it is for everyone else to play the game based on what Flandre is doing. To complement this style, he likes to go tanks and bruisers like Sion, Renekton, and Kazante, but don't be too surprised if he switches it up now and then and goes a more dynamic pick like Jace or Aurora. I think Flandre plays a much bigger role on this team than people think he does, and he'll probably do well at Worlds. Tarzan is an absolute beast right now. I've always held the guy in higher regard than average, but this year I think he's played well enough that everyone else is starting to respect him as much as they should. His reputation took a hit after his choke job at Worlds 2023, but he's been playing great enough for long enough after that it's time people forgive and forget. He looked like the best jungler at MSI in my opinion, and I still think he's a shoo-in for top 3 junglers globally heading into Worlds. Tarzan has a few big strengths, including his massive champion pool. We're currently in one of the more flexible jungle metas we've seen, with upwards of 20 viable picks including fighters, tanks, assassins, and even a few AP champions. Tarzan can pilot all of them, and he's one of the only junglers out there who I feel confident can perform at an elite level on basically any champion locked in. Tarzan also usually has great decision making in teamfights, especially around when to snap on someone and how hard to commit to it. He's not perfect at this of course, but for a team who fights as much as AL does, their players get a lot of practice at this stuff, and Tarzan has gotten pretty good at it. I would not be surprised if Tarzan ends up impressing a lot of people at Worlds and ends up cracking a lot of top 2 or 3 lists by the end of the event. Shanks is a player I've had my eye on for potential top tier talent for some years now, ever since I saw him on the bottom tier WE teams. He's an extremely aggressive player who loves to get in people's faces and challenge them to outfight him. His champion pool greatly complements this style, as his signature picks have always been battle mages or assassins. In playoffs, Shanks even experimented with some really aggressive champions like LeBlanc, Lissandra, and Kassadin to varying degrees of success. You never want to go against Shanks when he's on a pick like Ryze, Orianna, or Galio, and the team isn't shy about playing through him and letting him carry games. AL is a bit unique on that front, as they're more willing to put the eggs in the mid basket instead of only prioritizing bot side than most other teams at Worlds are. That said, Shanks has had a much more up and down split in Split 3 than Split 2, and this inconsistency might be a flaw in AL's game that other teams can look to exploit. Hope is back on a top tier LPL team, and he's continued his solid stable play from last split. I'm pretty excited for Hope, because I think this is genuinely a perfect meta for him. Hope's specialties are all over the place. He's great at more utility-based champions like Varus and Senna, he's got a solid weak side game with Jhin and Ziggs, you can trust him with crazy go buttons with Corki, Lucian, and Kai'Sa, and he's also super comfortable on immobile scalers like Sivir and Jinx. Recently in playoffs, he's also added a deadly misfortune to his arsenal, so basically he can play just about anything. I think Hope has great movement in fights, and this contributes to games where he has disgustingly high damage per minute stats. Hope's MSI showing might have been a bit weaker than expected, but don't underestimate his talent. Something I've always complimented Kyle for is his champion pool. He's always willing to play whatever his team needs, regardless of style. Some fans from a few years ago might recognize Kyle from the LCK and recall him as not being amazing. However, with the power of hindsight, we can see that not only did Kyle never actually play with a good ADC there, but he actually made the community consistently think that those ADCs were better than they were. Not saying it's concrete evidence that Kyle makes his lane partners better, just noting the trend is all. I've been really impressed with Kyle's play this year, and I think it's completely justified for him to find a place on a top tier Eastern team. Also, random side note, this guy just has a random obsession with Bard this year. It's weird, he literally only has 2 games of Bard in his first 4 years of play, but somehow found the angle to pick it 13 times in 2025 alone. People think of Keria as the Bard guy, but Keria also has 13 games of it, so we really just have 2 Bard fanatics at Worlds this time around. If you've been keeping track, I mentioned champion pools for every single player on this team. That's definitely one of AL's strengths, and it's something to look out for. When it comes to a wide variety of creative drafts, AL's got you covered. I don't think this will be one of the teams who will struggle as series go late, and they've got a number of different draft styles they can go for. Regardless of what they draft though, AL's game plan has been pretty similar across all the games. They like to fight a lot. Probably more than any other team at this tournament, AL is always ready to throw hands. They don't overforce fights randomly across the map or anything, but they will show up to every objective and sniff around for any advantage they can use to full send it. If you want a team to root for who will keep your heart pumping, this is a good team to pick. I also think this has been one of AL's weaknesses this split though. I thought in split 1 and 2 that they worked pretty hard on picking and choosing which objectives to fight and why, but it feels like in split 3 they've actually regressed and just started fighting everything again. This has been a big reason why AL have had so many losses in regular season. I think their objective setups are pretty solid, and most players on the team usually know their role to win the fights. That said, they sometimes set up or posture around objectives that they have absolutely zero business showing up for at all, and they'll end up getting wiped even if their players play the best they could. This happens a lot, and we see it around objectives like Grubs, Herald, and Dragons. This is a weakness I've pointed out for some other teams in past breakdowns like for the CFO video, and the upcoming 100 Thieves video maybe, spoiler alert, but AL does have one difference here. There's a reason why AL is in a different tier of team than those other teams, and that's because when AL goes for these ill-advised fights, they always at least set up the structure of the fight properly. They connect their team together well, click their buttons at the right time, control space as a unit, and pull the trigger together. Other teams who have this problem will usually have some issues in fight decision making in the first place, such as CFO's tendency to not account for numbers or cooldowns all the time. AL keeps track of this stuff meticulously, and that's why they fight so much. There's always at least one way in which AL thinks they can win the fight, whether it be a singular flash or a singular ult blown, even if that way is just a massive self-fulfilling bait that will lose them the game. With this in mind though, because AL always take the time to make sure the structure of their fight is sound, they also win a lot of fights they probably shouldn't have won, and claw their way back into games that should have been over. Again, if you want a team to root for that will keep you stressed the entire time, this is the team. I think with the way AL is playing right now, they'll struggle to win it all. They definitely felt outclassed at points against other teams domestically, and their playstyle feels a bit too volatile to me to win a tournament with other teams of this type of scale. There are certainly angles though, as I think AL can outdraft and outfight just about any team in the world, and they should be viewed as a threat at this tournament. That's all I have for you for this one. 6 down, 11 to go. I recently started a Patreon for people who want to support me more while I'm making these videos. I have 3 tiers, each with varying amounts of benefits including different types of behind the scenes content, and even a custom Poro drawing that I'll display in video outros. If that interests you, check out the Patreon link in the description. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye!